coaches sometimes get too caught up in thinking about coaching. And coaching is not the point. It's just a way of working and being with people.
David Drake said that at minute 8. And if you felt something shift when you heard this episode is for you. This is The Edge of Human and AI, a Viva la Coaching podcast. We sit right where coaching meets AI. And we're not afraid to ask the uncomfortable questions. We built this show because the coaching landscape is being reshaped by intelligent systems, and the organizations, leaders, and companies shaping that future deserve honest conversations. I'm your host, Rebecca Rutschman. Each week, we'll help you understand how AI is transforming coaching. We discuss leadership development and human growth across organizations. We will help you navigate the ethical and strategic decisions that come with bringing AI into the coaching space. You'll hear from researchers, innovators, and industry leaders, as well as experts who are reimagining what's possible. Whether you're navigating AI for the first time or already building with it, this is where you belong. Follow us now and join us at vivalacoaching.com. Come stand with us at the edge. We're starting our podcast with a special season from the leading voices of the NYU Coaching and Technology Summit 2026. We will bring you bold, unfiltered conversations at the frontier where coaching meets technology and artificial intelligence. Expect real talk, sharp minds, and unfiltered conversations where we dare to ask the difficult questions. I've known David for a couple of years now, more closely than last year. He was one of the first people I encountered in this field who seemed to be building from a completely different set of assumptions. He created narrative coaching before anyone quite knew what to call it. He developed the Five Maturities model to describe how coaches don't just get better, they become something different. He has spent 30 years asking the question most of us are only now brave enough to ask. What if coaching, as we've known it, is not enough? He never fit any of the boxes we have ready to go in coaching. What you're about to hear is a conversation with someone who has spent his whole career in third spaces, between what is and what could be, inviting us all to stop polishing the carousel horses and finally let them run. This conversation was recorded in the wake of the NYU Coaching and Technology Summit, still warm with everything that had cracked open there. If you want to listen to our special episode where we do reflect on what happened in New York, you can listen to it maybe even before listening to this one, to follow some of the threads we are going to pick up on. Welcome, David, to today's podcast episode. I'm really thrilled to have you here today.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca.
Coming back from New York, and it's already 3 weeks now that we're back, I realize. And you facilitated some sessions. I had the pleasure to supporting you. And when we think about the session that we did on Sunday, also around third spaces, when you stood in that room and we erased coaching from the map, what were you hoping that would happen?
I was hoping that people would free up their thinking. For years, there's been lots of conversation about what is coaching and how do we develop coaching and coaches. And I felt like the conversations were always constrained because of the realities of the coaching space. And in some ways, that's fine because it allowed a lot of people to find a path to get better at coaching. And at various junctures in history, in any profession, any science, any art, you have to make these quantum leaps where people break free of the constraints of how things were or are supposed to be. Otherwise, you just kind of go in circles and you're bouncing off walls and you never get where you need to go. And so I wanted people to just suspend the word coaching and come back to like, what in your heart and your mind do you want to be doing? What do your clients actually need from you? And What do you feel constrained by such that you don't give them everything you could? Because that's not coaching. And so rather than get stuck in the polarities or dualities of coaching, not coaching, we want to move to a third space where we could look at coaching, and coaching could be a part of the conversation, but we're getting out of the ping pong match.
And did it actually happen in the room?
I think at times it did. I think there were moments where people felt quite freed. I've worked in that way my whole life. I never really fit in very well anywhere. And so I would just create spaces so I could play. What I've noticed in that room that day, but also before and after that event, was there's always been these rumblings in the background that people didn't want to speak up, and they'd come to me privately after I'd given a talk. "Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I couldn't say that." And now I feel like there's a stampede. I feel like people are fatigued by a lot of the less useful parts of coaching, the way it's structured and organized. And they recognize that they and their world are in a very different place. And many of them don't really feel prepared for that. And they're not finding the kind of leadership in the coaching space that they often want. So from a change management perspective, you have to decide where is there energy and opportunity to make a difference. And I've done that within the coaching space for 20 years. And now I'm actually getting more and more insight and courage to just help create something completely different.
And I love that you said stampede, because at some points kind of felt like it.
Yeah.
People felt that they could finally say what they wanted to say for years, probably already. So you might not have been the only one, but the other ones were more thinking it internally.
Exactly.
And you've been advocating this. I know you've been going through this for years. And now you're quite often going, I've said this, like 20 years ago. So what do you think is finally shifting?
I think the field has matured and it's kind of at a plateau in a way. And so I feel like people have been thinking about this and writing about this and trying to bring, like, for example, evidence-based practices into coaching. I think the market is fully saturated in so many ways. Technology is demanding that we look at ourselves and coaching. So again, there's just a lot of people that have kind of maxed out of the paradigm that they had grown up in, and recognizing that we need both deeper ways of developing ourselves, just as humans ourselves, but also to be able to hold spaces for our clients. There was a lot of assumptions made about what coaching was in the very beginning, which have never really been questioned, like the sanctity of a session as the epicenter of coaching. And I think people are now seeing that if we look at actually the science of behavior change, that sessions themselves probably have a very different role than we often think. And it's not the one that most coaches are trained for. So I feel like it's just the realities of the world. And in this case, in some ways, Trump in the States is a great gift to us, even with all the pain and suffering he's bringing, because it's really pointing out the flaws in a lot of our modern systems and the limitations of what we've seen around leadership and the sorts. And so I feel like there's a desire, because coaches came to coaching largely because they wanted to help people. And they wanted to make a difference in organizations and in communities and lives. And I feel like a lot of them, we've done great things, and coaching's been a huge gift. And I think we've now met our match with AI and social unrest and environmental concern, where we think, maybe I need to do some new things to help people. And coaching, as we once thought of it, it's not enough anymore.
I love that. Maybe this episode has you curious about AI in coaching, but also a little unsteady on how to advance your AI fluency. Then I have the perfect invitation for you. We created something for exactly that moment. A complementary resource for everyone to become AI informed. It is a resource to help you join the conversation around AI and coaching. The core concepts, the language, the landscape, hands-on tools, and the research that keeps you ahead of the curve. Everything you need to actually understand what people are talking about before you decide what role AI should play in how you apply it in coaching, learning, and growth. Think of it as a finding your footing before you get anywhere near the edge. And the best, you can start right now, no procrastination. you can dive right in. Get it at vivalacoaching.com, go to the Rebel store, and it should be there ready for you to go. Come find your footing before you step to the edge. So we had a great question yesterday in one of the webinars I was in on people really wondering on how they can stay in the driver's seat. I'm not really sure we can still, but building on that, what do you think might be needed for being able to help steer this, help this move forward, become something different?
There's two main things. I just keep building bodies of work to provide resources in this larger gestalt of a conversation. So one is that if you just take organizations as an obvious example, or schools, they're still attached to an industrial era way of thinking about learning and development. And you know this, I know from your own kids. I've seen that with my own daughter. They're just not designed for any humans, except for a certain subset of people. So when we try to bring in like AI to coaching, or we try to think of coaching as an advanced development process, most practitioners still work from the same mindset they had when they went to kindergarten. And you see this even in executive programs for companies. It's old school thinking. And so a lot of what we need, which is my work on integrative development and the new book on the Five Maturities, we need to fundamentally rethink how adults actually learn and how they actually grow. One of the headlines, I suppose, of all of this work is that coaches sometimes get too caught up in thinking about coaching. And coaching is not the point. It's just a way of working and being with people. And our primary job is to evolve human beings. So part of what I think we're after is we need to come to a deeper understanding of how do we actually do that? How do we break a lot of the paradigms that we grew up with, which are just not functional anymore? So I think that's the first one, being able to develop a new paradigm, which then would then require us and support us to think about new delivery mechanisms called coaching. And I think the second thing is that, again, we borrowed a lot from psychotherapy in particular, without a lot of the rigor and other things that psychotherapy has.
Yeah, we left that out. Yes.
Yeah, we kind of forgot that. And even psychotherapy is going through its own turbulent, emergent renaissance. Just like every other aspect of our life, coaching relied on certain institutional knowledges from like psychology and things like that. But like everything else around us, all of our institutions are under extraordinary pressure. Many of them are crumbling. We need new forms of governance, new forms of education, new forms of community, new forms of transportation and ecology and healthcare and all of these things. So a lot of the pillars upon which coaching was built are not available to us in the way they once were. And the world has changed significantly since then. So we say in the book, the world in which coaching was born is not the world we live in now. Even less so, the world that's coming very quickly. We have kids relatively similar ages, and their world's going to be profoundly different than yours and different than mine. And so if we're trapped in this box called coaching, policed by certain unnamed players, then coaching will become, frankly, quite irrelevant. We're like any other species. Humans want to survive. They want to thrive. They want to flourish. They will go wherever they can find help. And I feel like we have so many amazingly talented and gifted people in the coaching space. And I think they're now, as we saw in New York, they can't wait for somebody to give them permission in some ways to free themselves to go be something else.
And stampede.
And stampede.
And stampede. Yeah.
And we saw this. I mean, I was blown away both on that Sunday event and then a funny thing, which was, again, very fitting for this whole topic, that our session that you and I did with help from Nicole was sold out. The only one that sold out. And yet we were in the smallest room.
Yes. Oh, gosh. We had to fit 55 people into that room.
In a small classroom designed for 25. And then we came up with a really creative way of building little neighborhoods. So I think it worked beautifully. And actually, the constraint actually helped us, I think, in a funny way, created this sort of weird intimacy that was quite lovely to watch. Again, if I go back even a year ago at that same conference, many of us were grumbling about these things over coffee or over drinks on the rooftop bar afterward. But now it's like front and center in them, and even like the sponsors, they feel it of the event. And so I feel like, going back to your earlier question, it's rising above the fray of the dialogue or debates about coaching. That's the wrong conversation. We have to elevate ourselves to the macro conversation of what's happening in the world. What do we as humans all need? if we freed ourselves of any of the assumptions or any of the predispositions or histories of coaching and said, let's just put this on the shelf. We might need some of that later because a lot of it's good stuff. But rather than try to tweak it, I think we need to just put it away. It's a funny thing, like when you're moving house, the analogy that comes to mind.
Which you did last year.
I've done twice in the last 18 months.
That's true.
It's always fascinating to watch what you decide to bring because you haven't lived in the new place. You haven't had that life. And so oftentimes you get there and you think, oh, good, I should have saved that. I could use that now. Or then you end up with stuff in boxes like, why did I think I needed this? So I feel like the window of opportunity is extraordinary right now because there's enough momentum that if we created some galvanizing ideas or gatherings or sort of nuclei of thinking, I think we're on the precipice of disrupting coaching. So coaching disrupted quite a bit, say 30 some years ago when it began in earnest. And then like every other systems, it's now sort of rigidified and, it's kind of reached this sort of stasis. And so just like everything else in nature, it's calling for the next level of disruption to reinvent itself, just like nature does all the time. I see this as an extraordinary time. And for myself, having been in this space for 30 years, I look at my role as just to continue to write and think and provide resources for others to, again, figure out what they want to do with this.
I still love the stampede wording because this morning I just saw a post on LinkedIn sharing 5 badges from one of the coaching bodies. And I'm like, 5 badges just for something new that they're kind of like establishing. And then we have the double down and then we have the stampede on each side of the spectrums, where I think this is quite interesting to see. And it's also a sign of what's actually happening right now and how fast it's happening.
Well, and you look at, again, the call for third spaces, that was a core part of my PhD. And I'm now actually found a couple of colleagues were actually meeting on the side to create some things around third spaces, which is one of my deep passions. But when you look at that in terms of politics, so the rise of the far right in the US and Germany and many places in the world.
Yeah, I think everywhere in Europe as well.
Yeah, the regression, of that. And some of it comes from a not very healthy place, but some of it actually comes from a deep human need for continuity, for coherence, and nostalgia. And these are all legitimate human needs and feeling of sameness and safety. And again, these are valid needs. I think both paths recognize everything's changing. And some are saying, I don't want that. I want this idea of what I thought I had before. And other people are doubling down on the other direction of, we're not even going to try to fix that. We're going to start to push towards something new. And there's people that benefit by continuing that tension between these two, because then we don't attend to what's actually really happening. And so again, I think the value of third spaces in the coaching context is, I'm not an advocate for getting rid of coaching. It would make no sense. I want to put coaching in a larger context that then frees people to be more agile in how they relate to their clients and to imagine new ways of serving their clients, and seeing coaching as a core tool they can bring to certain opportunities, but it's not the point most of the time. And so it's moving away from either or, but you just end up in a teeter-totter. What would you call that in German? What is a seesaw in German?
We call it a Wippe.
Wippe, yeah. So those are futile arguments. And so we want to be able to say, how do we be more intelligent about this transition to help people preserve their livelihoods, their identities, while at the same time reinventing it like we did that day in the classroom?
I love the moving analogy because if we say we keep coaching, but we're moving it.
Yes.
So what do we want to take with us?
Yeah, exactly.
What are the things that we want to keep? What can we put in boxes? My husband and I, we always argue about shelves. I hate shelves. I don't want to keep things in shelves because they just collect dust. And usually you don't pull the stuff out anymore.
No.
They just sit there. I call it clutter. He likes to keep things and stuff. But sometimes it's helpful to have it, let's say, in the boxes to then, I need that. And I had always this rule, like when we moved, that the boxes that we didn't unpack yet, they would sit somewhere. And after 2 years, don't even look at it anymore. Just give it away. Because if you haven't looked up anything for 2 years, maybe not with the photographs of your family,
they might mind.
In general, just stuff that you had and you didn't need for 2 years, it can just go. And maybe something like that we could also do when we now move coaching onto something new.
For me, I would love to create an opportunity where we actually did that. We brought the boxes of coaching into a room.
We should physically do that,
I know.
David.
I mean, put them on cards and we can make objects. And I could imagine, and then like anything, that there's a transference of our thinking onto the objects. We have called serious play for a long time, long before Legos and all that kind of stuff came on board, because people, they talk through the objects. And so then it would allow people to hold a badge certificate in their hand and just like really feel this, like, what is this? And why do I think I need this? And what value does this actually bring? And when am I actually going to use this? And do I really care? And is there a better way for me to meet those needs I have? I think there's just openings for the maturation of the coaching space.
I just want to get a little bit to your book because you just published it this spring. And it opens with a really striking evidence inversion on coaching, investing most heavily in the things that matter least to the outcomes of the client, because this should be the core element. And this is a discussion I had in the last episode also with Jonathan Rye. It's that we need to focus on what does it do for the client, that it's not important. But why do you think our profession still keeps looking away from it?
I went to my very first coaching event in 1997.
Wow. I started studying back then. That was my first semester.
This will be a reference that will be more meaningful to the Americans, perhaps, but I'd never done this before or since. I saw a flyer for a workshop on coaching. I didn't know what coaching was. And it was in Santa Monica, which is where the beautiful people in LA live, by the beach. I went there and I really liked this speaker a lot. And I said, I want to do what he's doing. And there were lovely people in the room, but many of them were like in the sort of Tony Robbins, multi-level marketing kind of rah-rah world. It was such a turnoff to me. And there was so much energy and excitement and opportunity, but there was really no foundations for most of this for quite some time. And I'll give a lot of credit to a lot of academics in the UK and Australia in particular. They actually led the way in some ways, more than the Americans. But there was really no foundations for a lot of this. And so back in the day, ICF used to run research conferences. And that's where a lot of this stuff, we started to realize we need to build better foundations for this. But by then, the horses were already out of the barn, as we would say in English, in that coaches were charging extraordinary amounts of money, most of which was completely unjustified and unsubstantiated. But it was seen as a sort of path to prosperity, and there's a lot of sort of abundance thinking and all that. It was quite exciting. And I feel like then we sort of retrofitted like evidence-based practices and scholarship after the fact. And then all the sort of graduate coaching programs started coming online. But then I observed there, they often got stuck in more literal or linear thinking about coaching. And then it doesn't really meet all the criteria for a profession. So I wasn't really sure what it was. And we talked in that room that day, I remember, about how if we want to be generous and call it a profession, it's the only profession that 40 years later still can't define itself. You wouldn't want to go to a doctor that couldn't define what it meant to be a doctor. And so what's happened now is the word coaching means everything and almost nothing, because it's used by so many people in so many ways with so many levels of different levels of qualifications. And so for me, one of the core coaching skills that we teach others and teach ourselves is actually useful for coaching, and that's the art of making distinctions. Too much is lumped under this sagging umbrella called coaching. Going back to what you were asking before about what's motivating all this, I think people are getting wet because the umbrella is sagging and there's too much weight on it and there's too much people running around propping it up and trying to go, yeah. I just feel like, maybe it's time for something else. Another analogy, maybe there's more umbrellas now. There's red ones and blue ones and green ones.
And bigger umbrellas for more people.
Yeah, or a community of smaller umbrellas.
Or like that, yeah.
All linked together.
Then it's going to be dripping in the spaces in between.
But that's okay. It's okay to get wet. But I feel like even in this moment, we're not sure what we're trying to actually build here. And we see a lot of cracks in the foundations through the associations who struggle with many things now and can't really keep up with what's happening in the world and are trying to move people back to regressing back to old thinking again. I feel like people are saying, no, we need structure, we need accountability, we need milestone, we need all those things, but in some kind of a new form.
You think we have now a chance to build something, a less linear thinking?
So something will emerge from this time in the next couple of years, one way or another. So my desire or my wish, when I used to do a lot of large scale change projects based in coaching for companies and governments, I said, change is happening. You can choose to support that and shape that or be run over by it. So I'm going to help you do the former.
Or resist, like in Asterix and Obelix, they resisted for such a long time.
Yeah. So it's coming. It's happening. So the change is already here. So that's what we would say. The change is already here. We just don't see it yet. So if we have sort of a positive reversal of the blind man and the elephant analogy, everybody sees a different thing, right? Great. We're holding onto this that was called coaching, and we each see different parts. We each want to play with different parts. We each want to focus on certain elements. That's all fine. I think we just need to move away from the illusion that coaching is one thing anymore.
What I loved in your book is your distinction always between mastery and maturity, because in coaching, we always say we have to move away from the transactional, the what, to the who we actually are. And you're actually offering this on the level also for coaches and for our profession to finally think more about who we are instead of what.
Yeah. When I created the Five Maturities model, it came out of a paper that some scholars in the UK had done working with one of the associations to build team coaching competencies. And they'd used a model I'd created like 15 years ago. And I was honored that that was the one that they found was most useful. So I appreciated that. And then I thought, well, maybe there's still some kind of traction in that thinking. And then, I've done a lot of things now in the AI space, exploring that and kind of thinking more about coaching now. And then I realized that that model needed a significant updating. The basic structure is the same, but I have a much deeper understanding. It started with our sort of railing against competency models because they're very useful, as it's often said about coaching, and getting people from zero to coach. They're not useful in getting people from adequate coaching to mastery in coaching.
And I still remember the first time I met you, someone at the table asked you if you're on master level, if you're an MCC or a master practitioner or whatever. And you were like, no, I'm David.
Yeah.
And then, why don't you get accredited? I don't need to. I still remember that conversation, and people were trying to convince you that it's a good path to do. So what motivated you just to stay David?
I have a number of degrees. I've tried a couple of professions early in my life, and I realized I didn't really fit easily anywhere. And I didn't like playing by the rules. And it's not always a great thing. I mean, sometimes it can be a lonely place. It can be a less than successful place. But I was always drawn to artists and musicians. If I could come back, I'd like to be like a jazz saxophonist, because I just feel like I'm really struck by the power. And I remember this interview with a very famous African-American Black, I think he was actually a saxophonist, or maybe he's a piano player, I don't remember. But anyways, they're asking him like where he got his education, like how did he learn to play that so amazingly? And he said, yeah, I studied music up until it got in the way of my playing. Then I stopped. And I feel like there's something in the new book. I just talk a lot about what we understand about artisanship and the craft of coaching. There's many of us that have followed very idiosyncratic trajectories to get to that place. And I developed some work that I've tried to, over the years, to teach people, but they're, again, not to emulate me, but to be their David, what that means for them. So my only real mission in life is to be the best human being I can be, and therefore of the highest service to others. And I called my initial work narrative coaching because coaching was a community that was close enough to what I wanted, and was a recognizable term to people that wanted to buy that. But I never saw myself as a coach. Again, I'm not advocating that everyone should do that because there's ups and downs to that. But I feel like coaching has moved through its adolescence. So you would know this from your own kids as they're emerging into that space, what that's like and how important that is, but how difficult that is for them and for us as parents.
It's both. It's beautiful and it's terrifying.
Yes, in equal measure.
Yes, you never know where you're at.
And it changes moment by moment because tend to be quite moody, and every day's different.
Moody? Oh, mine are the gloom of sunshine every day.
No, I'm thinking not. I've heard your stories, so
I know.
And I think coaching is maybe sort of, we've gone to college, so we think we know something now. We're proud of what we did and what we studied. But I feel like if you think about like indigenous cultures that still have like shamanic presences, or you look at long-running professions, you have people that clearly have risen above the rest. And so in the book, I'll talk a lot about, rather than trying to scale novices from ACC to MCC, an MCC is not more ACC. not because of the rubric that they use, but because a master is not more of a novice. It's a different category itself. It's transcended that and built on that foundation. When we want to think about developing practitioners, we march them through these things just like we did in kindergarten, first grade 1, grade 2. It's not how humans evolve. It's not how humans learn and develop. And so two of the things that we lack in coaching are sufficient places to practice and disciplines around practice. So I'd rather we model ourselves around elite athletes who evolve much faster and much better than coaches do, because there's a lot of science, there's a lot of rigor, there's a lot of structure around how do we evolve elite athletes. And also then at the same time, I want to be able to have more freedom to be artists who explore and experiment and make 1,000 mistakes to kind of figure out what their style actually is.
And explore other styles.
Exactly. And find their own. And I don't speak French, so you have to correct my pronunciation. But when Van Gogh went to Arles in France, where he painted a lot of his most famous paintings, he made one painting every day, give or take. These are not just like, I'm just going to do this. And these are world-class paintings. So how could he do that? And why do we not have that in coaching? Like I feel for people like myself in the beginning, I didn't understand how to sell coaching. So I ended up doing mostly a lot of just many leaders, managers, coach programs, building change processes for companies using coaching thinking. But I see this all the time in our students that they have a lot of gifts of coaching, but they don't know how to sell coaching or package coaching or organize coaching. And so they don't get enough chances to practice because they don't have enough clients. And so I think part of what's coming in the pursuit of maturity is we need to evolve as human beings so we can hold bigger and deeper spaces for our clients and help them evolve. We need to actually help people see a very clear path to mastery, as you would find for chefs or piano players or coders.
Even carpenters. They have to travel for a year just on their own, find jobs wherever, work with whoever, just to learn different things and get different exposure.
So we need more apprenticeships in coaching so that people get better faster. And it's not that we're doing this so that everybody's on one path doing the exact same thing, although there are some rudimentary things all coaches should understand. But it's more that we recognize that moving from a novice all the way up to artisanship, we know a lot about that path, but we don't have that in coaching. It's more about consuming content and badges and certificates and just consume, and then try to figure out how to make some sense of that in terms of becoming better as a practitioner.
And which are, by the way, all about the what.
Yes, exactly.
It's all transactional. And I just always thought that it's very interesting that we ourselves focus a lot on these transactional pathways or linear pathways where we want to incorporate more of the who in our client, or during our sessions. And that's our goal, but we ourselves focus a lot more on the what.
Yeah. The most common feedback I get to our newer students in narrative coaching when they're trying to practice, especially before the pandemic, when I traveled a lot more than I do now, was just inviting them to pause and stop coaching for a minute and just be quiet, let the other person talk and say nothing. And they say, well, why? I'm here to coach them. No, you're here to be with them. And I said, you're missing the vast majority of what's actually happening because you're trying to coach. And that's not coaching. And so in the book, which will be out finally in August, we talk a lot about the idea of operating as a guide. And you would know this from your time in mountaineering, right? So there's sometimes when we have to be the expert for safety, for a teaching moment, a teachable moment, where we have to assert our expertise or offer our expertise. And other times, if we do that, then they never really learn because they become too dependent on us. And so there's times when we need to let them explore and experiment and maybe even provide some initial leadership. And so I feel like we need to kind of bring that way of thinking. If I look at my own career in this space, I would say as a practitioner, my greatest gift is I'm exquisite in noticing. And that's the basis of everything that I do. So our job is then, well, how could we help people be able to mature themselves? And so then they see more, they sense more, and then saying, how can you master the skills you need to work with what you've just noticed? And then the third dimension of the model is around mobility. How can you move between these different ways of being, these different sets of knowledges, to almost in real time help shape an experience or guide an experience that the person needs. If you watch somebody who's new at some aspect of climbing and it doesn't go well for them, you use your mastery of this and say, what of this are they missing? Or what of this are they ready to learn now? And you don't give them everything you know, because then it just overwhelms them. And then no.
They would block and freak out.
Exactly. And they freeze. And then they worry about trying to please you. And so our fundamental question always is, what does this person need most right now? One thing. And then we scaffold up a series of one things until they go, oh, now I see how this actually works.
And it's interesting that you say that, because it's all about, you say, exquisite in noticing that you are. And I think in climbing or being a guide or whatever, it's observing. I let people usually walk in front of me and the weakest is in the lead. This is what you get taught, because otherwise they will be overwhelmed always trying to follow the fast walkers or the good climbers. And this way you have a better control over the group. I do this with my little one. I always let him lead in the mountains as long as it's not dangerous. Then he has to be behind me. But it's about observing on what they need or just looking. And then if they stumble or if something happens, you usually give them one thing. It's also like we talk to AI. No, it's a step-by-step approach. So try this and not 5 things, just one thing. So I like the comparison there.
My daughter loves zip lines and I'm terrified of heights.
I know. I couldn't even convince you going to the edge.
I know. But her mom hated it all even more. And I liked adventure. It looked like a lot of fun. And of course, when Hannah was younger, I had to go first. So I had to be brave and go do the zip lines. And otherwise, this is actually quite a lot of fun. And then some of those morphed into ones that go through the trees and you have platforms and you have to rappel down. And I always had to go first. So what I observed in one of those encounters, I was, 50 or 100, maybe 100 feet up in a redwood tree. And I had to rappel down to a platform that's only part of the way down, then rappel again. I'm a strong person. I'm very athletic. I like doing things. I like challenges. And I was petrified. Of course, in my head, I go, nothing bad can happen. It didn't matter. I was still afraid. And then this young guy, he was probably a third of my age. It was so helpful to your point. He said, get out of your head and pay attention to your feet. Oh, my feet know how to do this. I went right down to the platform. I was in my head, oh my God, I do all these things. And he said, you're in your head and then you're going to lean forward and you're going to lose your angle. He said, just walk down the tree with your feet. And, I can do this. And I feel like, again, we've built up all these artifices in coaching that we have to do all these things and know all these things. And really, if you think about the science of behavior change, which is a lot of what we're trying to do in coaching, there's a lot of pretty well-known, very simple elements. And one of them is helping people recognize cues for new behaviors. Another thing is having a default first option, a first action. And I feel like the ability to be mature enough to say, I'm just going to do this one thing. Right? And so the young woman that was our guide on the tree, she said, this man clearly has all the capabilities to do all of this, but he's not. So you could see, and she's encountered this 1,000 times, I'm sure. So what could I tell someone like him, he's the age of my father or my grandfather, she was like 20 or whatever, that he would listen to. And I talked to her afterwards, we had a good laugh about this. And I feel like part of why we focus so much on like silence and presence in our work is because we're just trying to discern where's the opening here now. And so, one of my main messages for coaches is stop worrying so much about coaching. Focus on evolving yourself, evolving your capacity to remain profoundly present to another human being in need. And then sort of discerning what is one thing we could do now that might help them move forward. And I think for me, it brings much more of a deeply connected sense of humility and presence, which I think people are longing for.
And something beautiful just emerged in my head. I was thinking parallel on the word of active listening. And I saw someone hustling there, trying to actively listen. You know what I mean? Because, it's one of the core competencies, I think, in all the competency frameworks.
Yeah.
But I always had my little struggles with them because when we talk about AI as well, what AI learned is parroting. And I was just thinking, maybe it comes from us being too focused on actively listening. Maybe it learned a behavior as well, that it always has to reflect back, that it always has to take an action to show that it's actively listening and repeating things back, reflecting, mirroring back, and all this. And I think we need a new word even for that.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's great. It's a great insight because for me, it takes all the focus back to ourselves. I have to actively listen.
Yeah, because it's pressure on you.
Yeah.
I always felt that, and I'm sure others felt that too.
Yeah.
But for me, the word that now popped up was it should be genuine listening, something calmer. Maybe you're very good with words. Maybe you have even a better word to offer, but something calmer that doesn't stress you by just thinking of the word.
I like this. I think that's a really good, great insight. See, I would argue, even go further. I would say that I'm asking myself when I'm coaching, what might this person need to hear? And so sometimes that's hear themselves say, be witnessed and mirrored about what's actually happening in themselves that they are not even aware of. The end result is we want our clients to feel heard. That's the focus. That's the measure, not did I actively listen?
Because I don't feel hurt if someone is just parroting back what I said. I personally often feel annoyed.
Yes, I'm with you.
Because I'm like, I just said that.
Yes. So what you're saying is you just heard that, right? And part of the belief system we have in narrative coaching is that not only is everything that we need right in front of us, but what the client is seeking is already present. We just can't see it yet or feel it yet. So we're not hunting by our active listening, try to pick up things. All of that's already available in the room. So we're like sensors.
It's more like collecting or picking.
Yeah. And just noticing like what vibrationally or energetically or verbally or somatically is arising here that might want some attention from us.
Or harvesting, maybe. It's also active.
Yeah. And it's still like us doing stuff.
That's true.
I just see myself as I'm just a mirror for what I sense is happening. And I just reflect things back to the client. Do you see this? Does this ring true for you? Because we're an observer, a witness to this. We have the luxury of standing back from what they're doing and saying. They're not, they're in it. So oftentimes my job is just to hold up the mirror, which we call a loving mirror, so they can see themselves. Are you aware that when you talk about X, your body shrinks in the chair? Here's what I see. Do you notice that yourself? How do you feel about that? What do you think that's all about? And so again, we're shaping the conversation. I'm not coaching them. I'm just supporting the conversation that wants to happen here by moving between roles to help them encounter themselves through their own stories.
I love that. I'm still lingering on this, getting rid of active listening.
I know you are. You got the bees in your bonnet now.
For me, it's very important because we hear that a lot from users of AI, like chatbots or like AI coaches as well. They're just so annoyed by this parroting. And for me, this is a mirror again as well of what we often do. I mean, good coaches don't mirror every single statement back, but it just reflects back on the industry as well in regards to should we actually do that? Because everybody using certain, like some of the early chatbots, they came up at least after 6 or 10 utterances, kind of like, does it really always have to do that? Because even usually after the third one, they start getting annoyed with it. So I'm wondering of what a better future would be, at least for us in human coaching.
And I go back to, and you're way better at this than I am, but then it goes back to prompting differently. So like one of the things I do often if I'm trying to sort something out is I'll just write what I currently think. And then rather than asking it to respond, which then is where all the parroting comes back in and or sort of adjacent stuff, I just say, what is the one word or phrase that stood out for you as you read this? I imagine it's a friend. And then I'll pick a word. And I said, what is it about that word that attracted you? I just assume it's a friend that's going to be more productive. I don't want its answer. I don't want its summary. I don't want its analysis. I want it to do what I would ask a core friend. I'm going to tell you about a difficulty I'm having, and I would like you to tell me what you notice as I'm telling you about this and what stands out for you about my story. Because oftentimes we're blind. We can't see those things ourselves. And so there are limitations in AI, but there's also limitations about how we use AI. And some of the skills that we complain about AI for, many humans are just as bad at. And that goes back to your thing about the cliches of active listening.
I shared yesterday in a nice workshop with a great audience of researchers and actually medical researchers in TB in Africa. And I shared with them some of my favorite prompts and that I like in the step-by-step approach is always putting something in there that it's challenging me back. And I think that was one of the most important things that they probably learned is kind of like you can use it to actually challenge your own thinking, to even challenge its own output. Like you said, pick up something and mirror it back to me.
Yeah.
We might not always like that as the one using the AI, but we can use it for that as well.
Yeah.
And humans don't always challenge us. Like you said before, like they're hesitant to actually say, oh, I don't agree. I mean, I know we in the Germanic culture are very good with that.
Yes.
Yeah? So we have a hard time agreeing.
Yes.
It's different with other cultures, but I think we learn so much more by not agreeing than we do by agreeing. The friction bit, I think, is an important one.
Yeah.
And as AI gets really very good at this competency layer, like we can do more and more or use it for different things. What do you think does that maybe free us humans to focus on instead?
So in this three-dimensional model that I created in the book, I think if we just take the three dimensions of maturity, mastery, and mobility. So I think AI can help us in each of those three. So as many people know, I've done a lot to support the Ovida platform and AI-based practice space. And what we observed in a lot of early pilots was that most coaches really didn't know how to practice unless they had an earlier career in music or sport or something where they had gotten those disciplines. So they could recognize, oh, I see that feedback. Oh, I agree with that feedback. But now what am I supposed to do differently? How do I get to what I want to be doing there? I think one of the things we'll see is more and more platforms that use AI to give us safe spaces to practice and do repetitive drills and do all the kinds of disciplines that any other profession or art or sport would do. I see for maturity, and I think that's where the humans are going to play the most important sort of element in people's developmental journeys. But even there, I think we can start to use AI to really challenge our own thinking, to ask us to reflect on our own decision making. If I feel like I've made a mistake, which we all do, I do as well in sessions. Oh, I wish I hadn't said that. Or, oh, now I can see I missed something completely. So I might want to do some preliminary sort of sorting out of my thinking and like what happened there and why was I triggered and then kind of form some hypotheses and then go to a human and say, I've kind of seen these three patterns that I have sometimes in these situations. And then talking that through as a human, because they're going to be able to ask me, at least at this stage of AI, far better questions. I think there's a great way to help us in the early stages of understanding something we're trying to improve on through the use of AI. And then mobility, I think it's really interesting. In the Ovida platform, you have the ability now to change the directness of the feedback. And their blunt option is extraordinary. It is extraordinary now what AI can do in terms of giving feedback. But again, I might want to say, for example, if I was supervising somebody, to kind of look at, how are they incorporating that feedback? Are they able to act on that feedback in real time and be mobile to change their status, or do they default back to what they've always done? I see the opportunity for us to start making much sharper distinctions about how we want to use AI. It's not one thing. AI is not this monolith. It's actually just like any other tool in our life. We can use it in all kinds of ways. And I think, again, if we make sharper distinctions on the human side between maturity, mastery, and mobility, then it starts to create different pathways and more specialized bots, sort of ecosystem approaches where there's many different facets of the journey. I'm working on another project with another AI company to use my work to create a whole ecosystem of learning. And then there's different roles that AI plays in some of them, but not all of them. And we're trying to then mirror what we know about humans, about how they learn and grow. And then how does technology need to support that or not support that? And then how do we get sensors in the system to be able to track, is the environment shifting as a result of the things that they're working on? So in that, going back to where we started in some ways, I think that the coaching session will become a part of our portfolio we offer people, but not the central feature of coaching.
What would you encourage people to do more of moving forward?
That's a great question. Part of it's just basic things like reflect on your best and worst sessions. What did you notice about the differences between the two in yourself? Looking at the overall coaching process that you use, where am I happiest? Where do I feel like I really bring value and have joy? And what not so much? Well, then how might you either shape your practice around that and or augment it through technologies to support the things you don't do well? The thing I probably go on the most on for our students is just stop paying so much attention to yourself. Start becoming much more adept and much wiser about noticing what's happening in real time in the moment you're in with your client, in the context in which the client works. I had this conversation yesterday about this with a very experienced coach, and we might do some work together. And she was talking about, she's moving through this sort of valley of despair, which we all have gone through, recognizing that we've done all this work over all these decades in coaching, and people are going back into these organizations which are still wreaking havoc on the planet. And I go back to James Hillman and Michael Ventura wrote this book on, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world's still getting worse. And so I feel like just really ask yourself, do you want to keep, the analogy I use is repainting the horses on a carousel, because the carousel doesn't get anywhere. Just goes in circles. And so I have this analogy. I want to liberate the horses, let them run free and find other horses. And I think that's what we're doing through this work on the Five Maturities is helping coaches. Yeah, you need to develop yourself. You need to mature yourself. But if you're just every year repainting the box that you sit in, it's not going to be satisfying for you in the end. It's not going to help the world become a better place. And it's not going to meet your clients where they really need you.
I'm sorry, but now I see Paris and I see those horses from the carousels everywhere running free through Paris. And I know David's been there to free those horses. So if you're in Paris in October, beware of the horses.
Yes, exactly.
I guess.
No, just bring a bag of apples so you can feed them, right?
So I'm going to borrow something now from your book.
Okay.
You closed with, what is calling you?
Yeah.
I want to ask you that question now. What is calling you right now?
So about 10 days ago, I turned 70, which was surprisingly a monumental birthday. I was surprised myself how significant that day was for me. And so I feel both practically and commercially, but also personally and spiritually challenged. Like I found out yesterday, I don't have cancer. There was some strong suspicion I might, but it's something else and it's quite manageable.
Happy for you there.
Yeah. That was quite something. I had to wait for a week.
Big load off your shoulders now.
And so what's calling me now is I feel like I'm in this really strange, it's like standing in Bronte Beach near Sydney where you're being hit by tides and waves coming from opposite directions. So part of me would like to be left alone to go garden and paint and hang out with my girlfriend. And part of me thinks I'm being called into something bigger. And those are both happening at the same time. And I also going back to third spaces, and I no longer see them as mutually exclusive. And I think actually each is going to help the other. And so what's calling me is being called to challenge myself about stories I tell about myself and things I'm not good at. I'm being called, I think, go back to the Boston conference and just the appreciation for my presence with people. I think that's more about what people need right now than me, but still. And so I think I'm being called into really opening myself to maybe show up differently now. And I don't know what that means yet, but that seems very clear and compelling. That I am doing that we're repurposing the Institute into a global open source learning community as a first step in that direction. I'm now connecting with others who want something similar. And so we're beginning to have conversations about what we might build around a global network. And I took a moonshot email I wrote to somebody. It's a really audacious, ambitious vision. And they said, yes, we would like to have a conversation with you about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's because I need more support and I need more allies. And I think it's already happening. We're in the collapsing phase of change in the coaching space. Everybody feels this. And so there's things we know about change. And I've spent my whole life in the change space. And I tell about myself, by the time I was 7, I'd lived in 4 houses, gone to 4 schools, been left in the hospital by myself for surgery. So I learned a lot about change. I had been a lost twin, so my twin died in utero, and so I was born grieving her. And so I've been on this quest to understand change, both to help myself, but also I feel like we're in this tumultuous time where humans need us to be more than coaches. I'll close by saying, when I first debuted narrative coaching 20 some odd years ago in Sydney, I got the first question I was asked, which is the question I'm always asked, but that's not coaching. And I said, perhaps for you, but it's an irrelevant question to me. I don't care. It's not a category that I use to compare myself with. And I said, did I show up as best as I could? We did this around a demo, and this woman was blown away by what happened. And they said, but that's not coaching. And I said, well, then either reframe coaching or leave me be to just go do this. And I don't care what that's called. And each of you could have your own version of this. You're not going to be like me. You can't be like me. I can't be Rebecca any more than you can be David. But together, we can watch each other and help each other be the best Rebecca and the best David.
I love that. That's a great call for what's ahead. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the session. But where can people connect with you or learn about what you're doing?
So we run a place called the Moment Institute. So that's the name of the domain. So themomentinstitute.com. And like I said, the cover for the book yesterday, so I'm approving that. And so again, within about a month, 3 or 4 weeks, that should be out and available. And as soon as available for pre-order, that will let people know that around the 5 Maturities.
We're happy to share the link then as well. We'll put it in the show notes once it's out.
Great.
Thank you very much for this beautiful conversation, David. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Even took some new thinking for myself from it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right.
Something David said near the end of this conversation has stayed with me. I don't care what that's called. He was talking about narrative coaching, about the first time he presented it in Sydney, and someone said, but that's not coaching. And his answer, even then, 20-some years ago, was simply, did it work? Did this person move? Was I fully present to them? And I think these are the questions worth sitting with. We are living through a moment where the coaching profession is forced to ask who it really is. Beyond the definitions, beyond the credentials, beyond the sagging umbrella we've all been crowded under, as David put it. And David's invitation is not to abandon what we've built, but to move it the way you move house. You decide what to carry, what to leave behind, and you discover what you actually needed. What do you need to leave behind? And what do you want to become? Take that question into your weekend. Until next time, just stay human. That's it for today's episode of The Edge of Human and AI, a Viva la Coaching podcast. If this conversation opens something up for you, the best thing you can do is share it. Send it to a colleague, a client, a fellow coach, anyone who's asking the same questions you are. The more of us standing at this edge, the better the conversation gets. Follow us on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And come find us at vivalacoaching.com, where you'll find resources, community, and conversations you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back next week with another voice from the edge. Until then, come stand with us at the edge.